Hi friends, host Eric here, host Talking with Famous People, and I'd like to talk about ideation, confirmation bias, actual confirmation, and data concept interaction here. Specifically, I want to talk about the fact that myself, Kim, Jewel, and I'll just leave it those three right now. Recently took the Socionics test that's available that tells you percentages of strength and value for respective functions, and it says what type you are as well. So I took the test and I got a score that was ENTP with pretty high degree of certainty, 44% strength NE. Um, I forget what it was, TI, and so forth on down. Now those percentages equal 100%. They don't necessarily represent anything. They don't mean anything compared to somebody else. So in other words, if I have 44 intuition and something like, well, whatever, 20 whatever, 30 whatever, introverted thinking, that doesn't mean that somebody who's got 40 intuition has worse or lower strength intuition than mine. It just means that it represents a somewhat lower percentage of total attention devoted towards that. When attention is must be split, kind of a thing. It's a weird idea as far as data goes, but the point isn't whether or not the data, their interpretation of it is a good way to break down the data. The point is that their interpretation of it is one way of breaking down data, and their interpretation of it tests for both type and splay of weighting within an individual along each of the functions. So it gives you percentages of strength and value for each function, and it gives you type. Anyway, I got an ENTP, and I got intuition heavy ENTP. But the thing is, how meaningful is that test result? Not very meaningful. And the reason is because I understand all this stuff so well, and have thought about it so much, and talked about it so much, and understand what a given question is likely going for, that if I wanted to, I could game the test. And even if I don't want to, it's kind of hard for me not to game the test a little bit, or at least be aware of what my answers are doing within the test. So as a consequence, there's nothing blind about my test results. In other words, the fact that I show up as an ENTP on a test, it doesn't mean that ENTP is really a thing or a type that is distinct from other things. And it doesn't mean that my test results prove that my self-typing is consistent with reality, but merely with my chosen reality as dictated by my choice of test answers. So there's that complication when dealing with somebody who's very aware of typology and the mechanisms thereof. Now here's the interesting thing. So I got this ENTP, intuition heavy. Jewel took the test. She's somebody who, before she took the test, I had typed as ISFJ, and she had self-identified as ISFJ. She knows a decent amount about typology. She's been around for a while, talked about it quite a bit, but I don't think she's necessarily going to be able to, I don't think she necessarily knows enough about it and the way in which one might create typing questions that she'd be able to gain the test very effectively. But in theory, at least, it's possible she could. I don't really know her level of understanding well enough to say. Now, she got what the score she got, and the test said she's an ISFJ, and it shows the cognitive functions as being SI, second, FE first in terms of weight, but with the other ones, she's an FE heavy ISFJ, is what it boils down to. She's an introvert, and she's got FE as her most weighted function. That makes her an ISFJ, if she's a sensor, which she is. So okay, that's consistent. So far, we've got two data points that are consistent with my expectations and were tested independently of me. I mean, anything to do with me. Like, I didn't have anything to do with Jewel testing. So that test result is clean, except insofar as Jewel might have gamed it because she knows herself to be ISFJ anyway. Now, Kim took the test as well. When I asked her what type she thought she was, she put ISFJ, in other words ISFP, because she didn't know the Socionics JP switch. She doesn't know enough about cognitive functions to have gained that test. I know, I've talked to her about it plenty. She doesn't understand it yet. She's starting to understand it a little bit better. She knows what FE is and stuff like that. But there's no way in hell she can gain that test. Now, interestingly, she got exactly the same results as Jewel. They're both ISFJs, both got the same results. They both even got the same weighting on the test. And, of course, they got along really well before taking the test. Jewel and Kim understand each other seemingly, right off the bat, seem to understand each other. And I had typed them both as ISFJ. And to the extent that one of those typings was more reliable would be Jewel's, because Jewel is self-identified as ISFJ. I typed her as ISFJ. She tested as ISFJ and sort of functioned as a channel archetype for the ISFJ. Now, to the extent that Kim's typing was unreliable would be because of confirmation bias on my side. I'd want her to be my dual, and therefore my typing number is unreliable. But this test showed not only that she's an ISFJ, but she's as textbook as Jewel is in my mind, because I see Jewel as a textbook example. So, having had all this confirmation of what I expected with this test result, it says something. It says that, number one, the test is lined up with my understanding of cognitive functions reasonably well. So, that particular test, which does show you strength and value of each cognitive function, seems to be a decent test. It gave me approximately what I expected for myself, and approximately what I expected for Kim, and approximately what I expected for Jewel. Although I guess I would have said, if I had guesstimated, I would have guesstimated that Jewel had a higher FE, that Kim would have been more SI than Jewel. But in fact, it turned out to be exactly the same. So, it doesn't perfectly correlate with what my guesses were, but it does show that, in fact, I'm with my dual, and it lends credence to the notion that the duality mechanisms that I've experienced and am trying to describe to everybody, and the duality mechanics that Socionics describes, are correct, at least for ENTP ISFJ. The big question in my mind is, are they correct for other types? I have yet to find a successful INFP-ESTJ relationship. So, they're supposed to be duals, but I've yet to encounter a successful one, and I've encountered a few unsuccessful ones. The point of this is, if you think typology is all nonsense, if you think that these things are self-fulfilling prophecies, or that it's confirmation bias, or what have you, I have two primary answers for you. Number one is, this example here is nice, not conclusive or anything, but it's nice. It's a sort of consistency you'd expect to see if your ideation were correct when you tested it out. Number two, I would point out that there is some manner of tension in which we each are existing in any given moment. Nobody can successfully make the argument that there's no manner in which they're attending to things while conscious and awake. There's some manner, and so it needs to be understood as a way to classify people's behavior. In other words, it's not really correct to interpret anyone's behavior without considering the manner in which they are paying attention. It's ignoring the frame. So that's my little video here on data, confirmation bias, models or taxonomies, manners of attention, and so forth. If you're a skeptic, that's good, but remember what you're being skeptical of. Don't be skeptical of type descriptions. Be skeptical of the notion that people can pay attention in different ways, and that some of those ways are mutually exclusive of one another. If you are skeptical of that, then explore that notion until your skepticism is resolved, because I think you'll find it does resolve at a certain point. Okay, so thanks for watching Tech with Fans. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese, and Thank God for duality.